Come on, get your cockles. Je voudrais. Yeah, what's that? Les petits manger. Breakfast, is it? Deux billets. 2 tickets, s'il vous plaît. Anytime, governor. Come again. Down and out in Paris and London. The podcast.
The podcast. Okay, chapter 8. So this is... look at the use of tense here. We had now 28 francs in hand. I mean, this is... we've seen the way in which tense is used here. Usually past tense, referring to, if you look at the last chapter, Boris slept the night at the house of a cobbler. Now, the shift into the present tense, we had now 28 francs in hand. It makes it that much more immediate. So it's a narrative technique of using tense shifts, and it's worth looking back to Funda to see how she uses that, or if she uses that for any particular effect. But here we have it here, I think, to intensify that sense of poverty and desperation that they're experiencing. Right, I'm going to try and play from the audiobook, so bear with me if it goes back a bit. We'll just hopefully catch up a little bit. So let's start it now.
We had now 28 francs in hand, and could start looking for work once more. Boris was still sleeping on some mysterious terms at the house of the cobbler, and he had managed to borrow another 20 francs from a Russian friend. He had friends, mostly ex-officers like himself here and there, all over Paris. Some were waiters or dishwashers, some drove taxis, a few lived on women, some had managed to bring money away from Russia and owned garages or dancing halls.
So that asyndetic list of people, his friends that he has there, just shows the range of the kind of people, the sort of people he acquaints with and knows, and these sort of menial tasks: waiters, dishwashers, taxi drivers. A few lived on women. So these sort of fairly hopeless characters, it would seem. Some managed to bring money away from Russia and owned garages or dancing halls. It's a really eclectic bunch of people who've sort of either scrounged money or working for low pay, or who've sort of made their money through possibly unscrupulous means. And the asyndetic list there just intensifies that sense of what a range and spread of acquaintances he has.
In general, the Russian refugees in Paris are hard-working people, and have put up with their bad luck far better than one can imagine Englishmen of the same class doing. There are exceptions, of course. Boris told me of an exiled Russian duke whom he had once met, who frequented expensive restaurants. The duke would find out if there was a Russian officer among the waiters, and after he had dined, call him in a friendly way to his table. "Ah," the duke would say, "so you are an old soldier like myself. These are bad days, huh? Well, the Russian soldier fears nothing. And what was your regiment?" "The so-and-so, sir," the waiter would answer. "A very gallant regiment. I inspected them in 1912. Oh, by the way, I have, unfortunately, left my note-case at home. A Russian officer will, I know, oblige me with 300 francs. If the waiter had 300 francs, he would hand it over, and, of course, never see it again. The Duke made quite a lot in this way. Probably the waiters did not mind being swindled. A duke is a duke, even in exile. It was through one of these Russian refugees that Boris heard of something which seemed to promise money. 2 days after we had pawned the overcoats, Boris said to me rather mysteriously, "Tell me, mon ami, have you any political opinions?" "No," I said. "Neither have I. Of course, one is always a patriot, but still, did not Moses say something about spoiling the Egyptians? As an Englishman, you will have read the Bible. What I mean is, would you object to earning money from communists?" "No, of course not." "Well, it appears that there is a Russian secret society in Paris who might do something for us. They are communists. In fact, they are agents for the Bolsheviks. They act as a friendly society, get in touch with exiled Russians and try to get them to turn Bolshevik. My friend has joined their society, and he thinks they would help us if we went to them." "But what can they do for us? In any case, they won't help me, as I'm not Russian." "That is just the point. It seems that they are correspondents for a Moscow paper, and they want some articles on English politics. If we go to them at once, they may commission you to write the articles." "Me? But I don't know anything about politics." "Merde. Neither do they. Who does know anything about politics? It's easy. All you have to do is to copy it out of the English papers. Isn't there a Paris Daily Mail? Copy it from that." "But the Daily Mail is a conservative paper. They loathe the communists." "Well, say the opposite of what the Daily Mail says, then you can't be wrong. We mustn't throw this chance away, mon ami. It might mean hundreds of francs." I did not at all like the idea, for the Paris police are very hard on communists, especially if they are foreigners, and I was already under suspicion. Some months before, a detective had seen me come out of the office of a communist weekly paper, and I had had a great deal of trouble with the police. If they caught me going to this secret society, it might mean deportation. However, the chance seemed too good to be missed. That afternoon, Boris's friend, another waiter, came to take us to the rendezvous. I cannot remember the name of the street. It was a shabby street running south from the Seine bank, somewhere near the Chamber of Deputies. Boris's friend insisted on great caution. We loitered casually down the street, marked the doorway we were to enter, it was a laundry, and then strolled back again, keeping an eye on all the windows and cafes.
There's not a massive amount to say here. Obviously, it's just procedural, really, talking us through what's happened. So there's not a great deal of voice. It's quite factual. What you do have are these parentheses here. So you see the use of hyphens. And Funder was more inclined to use brackets or parentheses, but it works in the same way. There's sort of these relative clauses that are used. And in this case, it was a laundry. It's to sort of give, to address the reader and sort of meet the reader's needs of helping to explain and understand the context. And Funder certainly did that as well. You know, when she jumped back to the present and reminded us what the person looked like, or the strange face that the person was pulling as she looked out the window, whatever it might be. That was used by Funder a lot. And we've got that here, just a little snap back to reminding us that we're being told a story, an anecdote. And this has more of a raconteur feel. We mentioned that word before when we looked at the anthologies. A raconteur, R-A-C-O-N-T-E-U-R. Is that right? R-A-C-O-N-T-E-U-R, raconteur. Yeah, so a storyteller. And this certainly has that. And certainly the people he meets have that tone. So it gives the whole book a flavour of the raconteur, even if George Orwell himself is less so. By having these strong characters like the Charlie and Boris, you've got these raconteur types who've essentially made their living, such as it is, through talking the talk. And what he does here, by using these parenthetic clauses, these embedded clauses, using hyphens to parenthesize the clause, it gives us that extra information that we need to help us understand. But I'll let it play a bit more. There's not a great deal to say. In fact, there's a bit more over the page. So I'll stop it again in about another page or so.
If the place were known as a haunt of communists, it was probably watched, and we intended to go home if we saw anyone at all, like a detective. I was frightened, but Boris enjoyed these conspiratorial proceedings and quite forgot that he was about to trade with the slayers of his parents. When we were certain that the coast was clear, we dived quickly into the doorway. In the laundry was a Frenchwoman ironing clothes who told us that the Russian gentleman lived up a staircase across the courtyard. We went up several flights of dark stairs and emerged onto a landing. A strong, surly-looking young man with hair growing low on his head was standing at the top of the stairs. As I came up, he looked at me suspiciously, barred the way with his arm, and said something in Russian. "Mot d'ordre," he said sharply when I did not answer. I stopped, startled. I had not expected passwords. "Mot d'ordre," repeated the Russian. Boris's friend, who was walking behind, now came forward and said something in Russian, either the password or an explanation. At this, the surly young man seemed satisfied, and led us into a small, shabby room with frosted windows. It was like a very poverty-stricken office with propaganda posters in Russian lettering and a huge, crude picture of Lenin tacked on the walls. At the table sat an unshaven Russian in shirt-sleeves, addressing newspaper wrappers from a pile in front of him. As I came in, he spoke to me in French, with a bad accent. "This is very careless," he exclaimed fussily. Why have you come here without a parcel of washing?
Just an interesting reference there to the pictures of Lenin tacked on the walls, and you'll have instantly thought, I'm sure, back to Funda when she was visiting. Oh, what's it called? Von Schnitzler. Von Schnitzler? Von Schnitzel? Schnitzler. Von Schnitzler. His house, but also the museum as well. When seeing there's the busts of Lenin and who else was it? Marx, isn't it? In the museum. So nothing you can really do with it. It's just an interesting similarity between the two texts. And here they're described as huge, crude picture, a huge, crude picture of Lenin tacked on the walls. And even that verb tacked sort of suggests that it's, I mean, yes, it is tacked, it's stuck to the wall, but it's tacky as well. It's sort of, it's crude and it's cliched and it's so obvious that it's a bit tacky. So you could look at that and you could possibly use that, when drawing comparisons with Funda. I'm not sure. It depends how you want to go with it, but it's there for the taking.
Washing? Everybody who comes here brings washing. It looks as though they were going to the laundry downstairs. Bring a good large bundle next time. We don't want police on our tracks. This was even more conspiratorial than I had expected. Boris sat down in the only vacant chair, and there was a great deal of talking, in Russian. Only the unshaven man talked. The surly one leaned against the wall with his eyes on me, as though he still suspected me. It was queer standing in the little secret room with its revolutionary posters, listening to a conversation of which I did not understand a word. The Russians talked quickly and eagerly, with smiles and shrugs of the shoulders. I wondered what it was all about. They would be calling each other Little Father, I thought, and Little Dove, and Ivan Alexandrovitch, like the characters in Russian novels, and the talk would be of revolutions. The unshaven man would be saying firmly, "We never argue, controversy is a bourgeois pastime, deeds are our arguments." Then I gathered that it was not this exactly. 20 francs was being demanded, for an entrance fee apparently, and Boris was promising to pay it. We had just 17 francs in the world. Finally, Boris produced our precious store of money and paid 5 francs on account. At this, the surly man looked less suspicious and sat down on the edge of the table. The unshaven one began to question me in French, making notes on a slip of paper. Was I a communist, he asked. By sympathy, I answered. I had never joined any organization. Did I understand the political situation in England? Oh, of course, of course. I mentioned the names of various ministers and made some contemptuous remarks about the Labour Party. And what about Le Sport? Could I do articles on Le Sport? Football and socialism have some mysterious connection on the continent. Oh, of course, again. Both men nodded gravely. The unshaven one said, "Wiedemann, you have a thorough knowledge of conditions in England. Could you undertake to write a series of articles for a Moscow weekly paper? We will give you the particulars." "Certainly. Then, comrade, you will hear from us by the first post tomorrow, or possibly the second post. Our rate of pay is 150 francs an article. Remember to bring a parcel of washing next time you come. Au revoir, comrade."
So there's the repetition there of that word comrade, which we heard before in Funda, and it's sort of a euphemism, isn't it, for friend, but it has that political connotations of kind of socialism as well. So it's certainly worth drawing a comparison between how it's used here and how it's used in Funda as well. So that use of a sort of a political euphemism, a socialist euphemism, the idea of sort of a brother, a fraternal metaphor almost, because he's not a comrade. He certainly isn't part of their political agenda. He isn't Russian. So it's wrong, but you can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to use that as a way of ingratiating him into their world.
We went downstairs, looked carefully out of the laundry to see that there was no one in the street, and slipped out. Boris was wild with joy. In a sort of sacrificial ecstasy, he rushed into the nearest tobacconist's and spent 50 centimes on a cigar. He came out thumping his stick on the pavement and beaming. "At last! At last, now, mon ami, our fortune really is made. You took them in finally. Did you hear him call you comrade? 150 francs an article. Nom de Dieu, what luck! Next morning, when I heard the postman, I rushed down to the bistro for my letter. To my disappointment, it had not come. I stayed at home for the second post. Still no letter. When 3 days had gone by and I had not heard from the secret society, we gave up hope, deciding that they must have found somebody else to do their articles. 10 days later, we made another visit to the office of the secret society, taking care to bring a parcel that looked like washing. And the secret society had vanished. The woman in the laundry knew nothing. She simply said that ces messieurs had left some days ago, after trouble about the rent. What fools we looked, standing there with our parcel. But it was a consolation that we had paid only 5 francs instead of 20. And that was the last we ever heard of the secret society. Who or what they really were, nobody knew. Personally, I do not think they had anything to do with the Communist Party. I think they were simply swindlers who preyed upon Russian refugees by extracting entrance fees to an imaginary society. It was quite safe, and no doubt they are still doing it in some other city. They were clever fellows and played their part admirably. Their office looked exactly as a secret communist office should look, and as for that touch about bringing a parcel of washing, it was genius.
So what we've got there then is another anticlimax, an undermining of their scheme. It seems there's hope, and then it's undermined. And we've had that in nearly every chapter, these sort of harebrained schemes, these things that promise money and security, and then, oh no, it doesn't work out. It's always sort of 1 step forward and 2 steps back. It's that sort of, that seems to be the narrative progress of this, or if you can call it progress in this book. It seems to always be sort of a little bit forward and then further back than they were before, almost, because they've had to spend some money. We can't pass up the chance to compare the communism here in this sort of secret communist society, or so-called secret society, with the Stasi that Funder was describing. And it's certainly worth looking at. I'm not sure what you could do with that necessarily, because it's not so much about narrative style, more about content. But it's certainly, a page that you might want to turn the corner over to come back to if it's something you could make relevant. It's the only real section of this book that does have a direct correlation with communism in that sense. So it's certainly an interesting point, but it'll depend on where you want to take the essay, the coursework essay, to as to whether you actually want to use that or not. But it's there to explore in terms of how it's presented. And that's it for chapter 8. So I'll see you again for chapter 9 next time.